Thank you again for joining us for our virtual session today on engaging our infants, toddlers, and preschoolers in learning at home with Deborah Stipek and Renee Scott, sponsored by the Stanford Graduate School of Education. My name is Manaf Mansour, and I'm the Associate Director of Alumni Relations and Community Engagement at the Graduate School of Education at Stanford University, and uncle to two nieces, ages 13 and 9, who are learning at home right now. It's a pleasure to see so many of you joining us as we consider research-based strategies, opportunities for growth, and timely reminders on ways we can engage our young children, our littlest learners at home during this challenging time. And with that, I'll turn it over to Deborah and Renee. Thank you both for joining us today.
We're delighted to be here. I am Deborah Stipek. I'm a faculty member in the Graduate School of Education, former dean. And my other job is to be the faculty director of the Haas Center for Public Service. I have a 2.5-year-old grandson and a 3-month-old grandson. And thanks to the full-time demands without childcare of my daughter and son-in-law, I am also a grandma nanny.
Hello, everyone. I am Renee Scott. I am a graduate of the GSE. I got my master's degree and doctorate from Stanford in 2015. And I'm currently the Early Childhood Education Director for Education Partnerships at the Haas Center for Public Service. My background is in education as well. I taught kindergarten for a number of years, as well as other ages in elementary school. And I am also mother to 14-year-old Jackson and 11-year-old Penelope. So I too am working at home, as I think many of you are, with your children. So both of your full-time jobs are combining into one each and every day. So we're so grateful that you're all here. And I'm glad to be invited to be part of this conversation. I also want to take this opportunity to just remind all of us that this is a big shift, this current situation for us. Many of us are working at home and also managing children at home and trying to think about their education as they're away from their daycare centers or classrooms, preschool classrooms, pre-K, TK classrooms. So just a quick reminder that, you know, at this time, good is perfect at this moment. So we're going to remind us a lot of times, we want to give ourselves a break at this time too, that what you're doing is great, it's perfect. You're there for your kids, and that's going to make the most difference at this time.
My daughter and I have a lot of conversations about the good enough parent.
Mm-hmm.
It should take a little bit of the pressure off. Let me just say something about how we're going to work today and what we're going to focus on. Renee and I are going to talk a little bit about some particular areas of learning for young children, and then we will break up. We will stop and let you ask any questions you want about those particular domains or anything else you want to talk about. We're focusing on language literacy and math, partly because, especially if you have a child who's 3 to 5, those are important considerations, and not having the option of being in preschool. I think a lot of parents and grandparents may be wondering what they could be doing to advance their children's skills and understandings in areas that typically they think of as being the purview of a preschool. It also happens to be what Renee and I know most about. So we thought it would probably be better for us to talk about what we know. Language literacy, skill development, and the kinds of things that you can do at home to support your children. I'm going to focus on math. We are not going to talk about flashcards or worksheets. If anybody's signed up for this because they want to learn how to do that, you can turn off your computer, because that's not the kind of teaching, and we use the word teaching very loosely, that we're talking about. We're really talking about how you engage your children in opportunities to develop their skills that are natural, that are child-friendly, that take advantage of their own personal interests and initiated activities, that are woven into everyday activities of the family and routine. So that's the basic philosophy of our approach to teaching. I think it's one that has a very strong research base, and the kinds of things we talk about are going to be in those broad categories. So I'm going to go right on to literacy and take it away, Renee.
All right, thank you. So just to start us off real quickly, I always like to say when I'm teaching that we have this common metaphor with young children saying that they're sponges. And I actually don't like to think of them as being sponges, because it's not like they're just accepting everything we say. They're actually interacting with what we do and what they're doing and their environment. And so it's important to keep in mind that they know a lot already, especially your kids who have been going to other places. They might know things that maybe you haven't tapped into, and this is a great opportunity to see what that is. So everything that that I am going to suggest through as I'm talking today will be something that hopefully you can connect to an experience that they've had already, and that will make it really salient for them. So I'm going to just start with the very what's known in the research as the simple view of reading and writing. Basically, it's that reading comprehension is made up of two kind of major areas of learning for literacy and language, and that's the area of decoding, which is learning the code of reading, learning what the letters and sounds say, and being able to essentially sound a word out. And then there's linguistic comprehension, which is understanding language, understanding vocabulary and what it means. And when we put those two things together, we get reading comprehension, which is the goal. And this is the goal for when children begin to start reading. Not necessarily the goal for our pre-K kids, but I wanted to start with that as the goal, as something to keep in mind. So to take this a step further, the way that this might look in a kindergarten or a first grade classroom is that decoding includes phonemic awareness and phonics, which is phonemic awareness is the sounds of words, all the sounds that go into it, the sounds of individual letters and chunks of letters, and also phonics, which is matching the letters and identifying the sounds that go with it. So matching letters and sounds. Comprehension includes fluency, which is not just reading fast, but also reading with tone and accent and understanding how to pause in the right places and having a good cadence. And then vocabulary, identifying words and their meanings, and text comprehension, being able to read text and then say what the text means. So what does that look like for pre-readers? What are we doing to get them to be ready to really dive into the learning to read aspects of phonemic awareness? Well, for pre-readers, that looks like hearing and playing with sounds and words. And I just want to point out right away that I've tried in this presentation to pull out things that chances are you're doing at home already to reinforce that these are the things that make a difference. And then you can highlight them in certain ways with your kids to really focus on the literacy aspect of it. But I saw some of you are preschool teachers, and a lot of parents are on here. Singing songs with your kids is one of the best ways to do phonemic awareness practice. You see, if you can download music off the internet and let them watch their favorite singer. There's lots of singers, Justin Roberts and Raffi. Last night I saw that there was a Disney show, a sing-along Disney show. All of those things are helping kids, that singing is helping kids learn to read in the long run. They can hear the sounds, the different sounds. Another way to do this is playing silly songs or things like the name game, like Renee, Renee, Bobe, Banana, Nana, Fofe, Fee, Fi, Mome. All those silly sounds that kids make are actually productive. So encourage that, keep it going. One of the things kids love to do when they're very small is imitating animal sounds. In fact, my son's first word was moo because we read The Big Red Barn every day when he was little. And I knew at that point he was hearing that sound and starting to make it and use it. And kids need to identify sounds by hearing them before they're able to read them. Doing rhyming books is also really great. Doing a Dr. Seuss book, reading to the end of the sentence and then helping them figure out the final word based on the rhyme. Great practice, getting them ready for phonemic awareness and reading. And then finally, listening to books. There's lots of ways to let kids listen to books. I believe I heard that some of the book sharing applications or apps are making books free for now. And so downloading those books and letting kids listen to them is a great way, or having a book with a tape. A lot of teachers do that in classrooms and kids really love it. It helps them work on their fluency because they get to hear how people are reading. Phonics is matching letters and sounds. So moving on to that. The way that we start doing that with little ones, again, we want to make it a game. We don't want to give them flashcards. So singing the alphabet song or variations of that. I think on every, a ton of children's albums like Raffi, there's different versions of the alphabet song. So singing those, that also gets back at that phonemic awareness piece. Playing I Spy, kids love this. I Spy a word that starts with G, having them find a G somewhere in their environment. Doing scavenger hunts for letters. My kids used to love, I would put a letter, a picture of a letter on the end of a wand, and they walk around the house and find everything that starts with that letter. And a great way to do this is to use the letter that their name starts with. Cut out a letter on a piece of paper and give them things to glue onto it, just to get used to what that looks like. Incidentally, using fine motor skills is incredibly important for literacy. We'll talk about that in a minute, but anything that's fine motor or gross motor, that's part of their development too, and it's really important. And then finally, kids love their name. So use their name. Talk about if their name is Catherine, find things that start with the same sound or the same letter. Find as many letter C's as they can. Look in the pantry. Find things in the pantry that start with that. Lots of ways to address this. So the second piece is comprehension. Again, fluency is oral fluency, so you want to get your kids talking. And even if they aren't using a lot of words, the more that they're talking to you and telling you about things that happen, and you can get the cadence of a conversation going, that will help them with their reading in the long run. You can ask them to start to narrate things that are going on around them, asking them questions like, and then what happened? And then what did you see? And what color was it? Or was it big or was it small? Trying to keep them talking. The more, and then talking back with them, the more they hear you talk, the more that they'll get those words. Again, listening to book recordings is a great way to work on oral fluency. And then ask kids what they think about things. This gets back at, they all know something already. When you're talking to them about whatever they're engaging with. So ask them, what did you think about, what were you thinking when you were watching that TV show? Or what were you thinking when your tower got knocked over? Or what did you like about that page on the book? Let them tell you how they're feeling. It helps identity development as well. In vocabulary, naming objects. This is one of the things you're probably doing a lot. When you're reading through books, talk about the pictures and the characters. Ask how their child thinks that how your child thinks that the characters are feeling, why they might be doing something in the pictures. Anything along those lines that get them engaged with the text is important, and it helps build their vocabulary. Describe things as much as possible rather than judge. And what I mean by that is rather than saying, that's a beautiful flower, you might start with, oh, wow, that's a pink flower and it has a lot of petals and its stem is green, and look at it and touch it and let the kids hold on to it, describing it rather than just calling it beautiful. You can then say, oh, and it's beautiful, but use lots of language to describe things. Another thing is to narrate what they're doing. Oh, I see that you ran really fast down the path. Can you run really fast back? Or can you hop higher or even higher? Or can you put the yellow pencil there and the green pencil there? So the more that you're using words to narrate what they're doing and ask them to do things, the more they'll pick those up. And then finally, when you're doing the laundry, ask your kids to find all the pink socks, or ask your kids to find all the green socks, or find something that doesn't fit and say, why doesn't this belong with that group of things? This is a blue sock, it doesn't belong with all the pink socks. So those things, just getting them talking is really important for vocabulary. Finally, text comprehension. This is kind of the old sit and read with your kids as much as you can. Retell stories to them that are familiar. If they love to read a book and they want to read it again and again and again, do your best, even though it's hard sometimes to read it again and again and again. I can tell you that my kids are 11 and 14, and there's still some children's books that I know every word to because I've read it so many times, but they love it, and it's really good for their reading development to get used to the way it sounds. That also helps with their fluency. Ask them to predict what's going to happen at the beginning of a book, and when you get to the end, confirm it. Say, were you right? Did you know? How did you know? What were your clues? Also, really important for young children is talking about how a book works. What's the front of the book? What's the back of the book? Where do you turn the pages? Where are the numbers or the page numbers? All of those things are important. And then finally, the last bit of this is that ultimately text comprehension is not just about taking in what a book means, but also understanding that text is used to communicate. So ask kids when they color or paint or scribble or draw or build something, ask them to tell you the story of whatever it is. Then they understand that the language is what tells the story of whatever that they've been doing. It's the thing that is the communication piece. So those are a lot of ideas, and you can build off of those and do lots of things. They all help support language and reading development. And now I'm going to turn it over to Deborah to talk a little bit about math.
Okay, you may be wondering why we're talking about math with little kids, but it turns out that math is a lot more important than we previously realized. I want to mention a couple things about math related to interacting with little kids that are important to consider. One has to do with your own attitudes and anxiety. So math anxiety is very common. People are much more willing to admit that they're not good at math. Just feeling uncomfortable with math is pretty common. You don't want to pass that on to your child. The other issue is gender. We've learned in our research that by 3rd grade, girls are already rating their math skills lower than boys, even though they're doing just as well as boys in school. So we are somehow giving messages to girls at a very young age that boys are better at math. It's not true, and it's not good for them or for the society. So just be aware of what things like when you say, have your dad help you with your math homework. I was never very good at math. You're conveying a gender stereotype. So let's talk about why I have gotten so interested in math and why I think it's really worth paying attention to. One is that we have research now that shows that the skills that children enter kindergarten with in math are very, very highly predictive of how much they learn in math, of how well they do. This shows kids who entered at the top 25%, the yellow line, the lowest 25%, the purple line, and the middle, the pink line, when they enter kindergarten, and it shows their trajectory up through 8th grade. And what you'll notice is that there's a very high prediction of those entry skills. So what children learn and know and understand when they enter kindergarten has important implications for how well they do throughout elementary school and middle school and beyond. Most people, when I ask them what is math for little kids, they will say that it's basically counting and shapes, essentially recognizing shapes. But it's so much more. There's so many more things that lay the foundation of children's further math skills. So that, yes, numbers, counting, truly understanding, not just rote counting, but understanding what a 5 means, but also data analysis. I observed a classroom where kids were going around asking children whether their favorite ice cream was vanilla, strawberry, or chocolate. They had pictures of ice cream cones to be able to use for their survey, and they made check marks. Then they added up the number of children in their classroom who preferred each kind of ice cream, and they had discussions about which kind of ice cream is liked by the most children, how many more children like chocolate than strawberry, which is basically data analysis, albeit at a 4-year-old level. Measurement, being able to compare things, tall, little, short, are all part of mathematics. Geometry, not just knowing shapes, but knowing the defining categories of shapes, of understanding space. And then algebra, believe it or not, children are actually laying the foundation for algebra in those first few years. Things like recognizing patterns, 3 green, 2 orange. 3 green, 2 orange is basically 3G2O. So it's recognizing patterns doesn't sound like algebra, but it's laying the foundation of algebraic thinking. Like in literacy, there are a gazillion things you can do that are everyday activities that you can weave in math. So here's cooking, and is a wonderful opportunity for measuring or counting. Setting the table. being at the grocery store, how many lemons do we want? Can you count them as we put them in the bag? If the toys, as these toys are lined up, which is the biggest truck, which is the smallest truck, which is the longest truck, engaging children in conversations, but right in the midst or in the context of things that you're already doing. There are also lots of games that you can play that are great fun with little kids. Dominoes, matching, 5 dots to 5 dots, tangrams. One of my favorites is, it's usually called War. We try to avoid that title. So it's basically comparing numbers. It's with a simple deck of cards. So 2 people, the child and an adult, or a child and a sibling, have half the deck of cards. They each turn over 1, and the child has to decide whose card has the most on it. Little kids will do this by counting the number of hearts or counting the number of clubs. And then if they have the most, they get to keep the 2 cards, and you keep going until somebody has all of the cards. One of the reasons I like this particular game is that, 1, it's materials that most people have at home. You don't have to go out and buy anything in particular. And 2, you can make it really easy or really difficult. So if your child is still trying to figure out 1 to 5, then just take out all the other cards and just play the game with ace through 5. If they are pretty advanced, then you can each put down 2 cards, and they have to add them together to see who has the most, or even multiply them if you really want to get advanced. One of the things I hear sometimes from teachers and sometimes from parents is, we don't have time for math. There are just too many other things. And I really want to focus my attention on social skills. Social skills can be taught in the context of both literacy and math activities. So if 2 children are playing a math activity, or even a child and an adult, the child is learning turn taking, they're learning impulse control, they're learning to pay attention, they're learning to be graceful losers or winners. So I don't think we need to think about timeout. We work on social skills in this setting, and we work on math in that setting, but we can really think about how the 2 can be combined. One of the things I like about combining literacy and math is that most parents read books to children. And all the things that Renee talked about that you can do in reading a book that helps them develop their vocabulary and their comprehension and their reasoning, you can also embed some math activities like which is the tallest tree, which is the shortest tree, or how many ducks do you see on that page. So even a picture book that's not designed to teach math can be used to embed some very naturalistic sort of math talk and conversations. I just wanted to mention in finishing that one of the resources that is available that you may want to check out is a program of work that I've been leading called DREAM. We do know how to spell DREAM. This is not DREAM misspelled. It's Development and Research in Early Math Education. At that website, you will find all kinds of resources, including a whole new site that's for families of games and other activities and other blogs and things like that related to math. If you want to really get more into math than we have time to discuss today.
So I've got a really great question here, Deborah and Renee, from Sarah. I believe children learn through playing, but I also worry my 1-year-old is getting bored of playing with just me all day. What are some activities that we can do to give him more stimulation than playing with the same toys and reading the same books all day?
This is a 1-year-old, so just doing something in a different context can seem to you like it's the same thing, but to a 1-year-old it's completely different. The other thing is there are apps now, and I was expecting somebody to ask about literacy and math apps. One is a little on the young side, but I think you will find some things that are interactive, that all they have to do is touch the screen. but do look at some of the apps that are designed for very young children. I think you'll find it, and the question I get, well, is how do I know if it's good for my child? If your 1-year-old is attending, then there's something there that is engaging his or her brain, and that's what you want. Renee, do you have anything to add to that?
I would say also think creatively about what you might already have in your closet. Maybe pulling out things that feel differently, like cotton balls, or I'm trying to think of popsicle sticks, or if you've got sand, or even bringing in things from the outside, or going outside and touching leaves and stems and feeling the grass or the concrete. Those sorts of experiences are really good for kids. And then collecting. They can collect rocks, and then you can bring them in and you can use them for math. You can start counting them, or you can, you know, but they can practice picking things up, putting them into a bag. That's a great fine motor activity. And also if you're walking around, it's a great gross motor activity. So that's just a way to maybe change up what you're using.
And don't forget pots and pans and wooden spoons.
I actually saw something today online where somebody gave their kiddo a toy hammer and a squash and just let them hammer away at the squash because it feels different and it makes a different sound. And it was really interesting. So anything that changes the sound or the sensory input of what they're using should be interesting for your child as well.
I've got a question from Yvette. I'm having 2 Zoom meetings with my preschool kids and families. What's the most important thing, activities, etc., to do during those meetings? I do songs, reading, and projects, and I usually have 3 activities, and I have sharing time for the kids. Also, the days that we don't meet, I video record myself reading books or activities or both and send it home to all the families. What else can I do with my families on Zoom?
Oh, man, I just want to say you are my hero to try to do preschool by Zoom. Renee, do you have some thoughts about that?
I think it's a challenge. One thought I might have that I've seen my children's teachers doing is activity type things. So if there's a song, you can get them all dancing to the song that they like to sing maybe. Another thing that could be fun is if their parents would let you, they could videotape the kids dancing and you could send it in and then show that to the children in the class. They might get a kick out of seeing themselves, you know, on TV or on the computer. That might be a real motivator to get them doing things. But I think just getting them talking and engaging in any way, it sounds like you've got lots of really great things going on already. I would just keep it up.
Yeah, I would emphasize anything that engages them actively, whether it's physically or singing or talking or whatever, because they're not very good listeners, as you know, for more than a few minutes. And even listening to a story, unless they're engaging in conversation about the story, is probably hard to do. So games and songs that get them physically moving, I would think would really help.
I got a question here from Tenley. How can we best support preschool age kids who are second language learners during this time?
Any time that you're doing something to build language, it's helping kids that are learning English as a second language. But also keep in mind that it's important for kids who have multiple languages to hear their own language as well. So doing songs and activities that maybe include multiple languages, or games with different languages as well. But anything that reading, talking about using books that have lots of pictures and ways to describe the pictures and talk about them is useful. And any kind of realia that they can talk about is useful for kids that are learning English. I like to think of it as preschoolers are often learning a language if they're learning English anyway. That's even though it's their first language, they are still needing to learn a ton of vocabulary. And if they're learning 2 languages at the same time, it's like they're just adding in those second language or first language vocabulary words to the other language vocabulary words. So just keep building that up. We want to build up their vocabulary and build up their ability to use those words and talk and engage with the world with that language.
Tell me, one thing you might think also of doing is empowering parents, because a lot of parents who don't speak English at home, they feel like they shouldn't read to their child in Spanish with their native language, or they shouldn't engage their child. What we know now is that developing their primary or original or first language actually helps them learn English. So parents should be encouraged to read to children or talk to children, engage children in conversation in the language that they are most comfortable with.
This question comes from Joshua. I worry that my 15-month-old, sorry, that scrolled away. I worry that my 15-month-old is missing out on social interactions with other children. Of course, all the daddy and mommy time is great, but should we worry about the social isolation?
Not for a few months. If it's 2 years, then I would say, yeah, we should start worrying about it. But I think children, as long as they're interacting with a human being, I think they're still learning turn taking and empathy and the things that are important for them to learn. So yeah, if we go past 6 months, then I'll start worrying, but I think you're good till then.
I've got a question here from Jeff. Sometimes we find it unavoidable to use TV as our babysitter. How much screen time above 0 should a 1.37-year-old be getting? And for the screen time, is there a recommendation as to programming? I'm concerned that most of the programming for young children are simply too advanced for a child who hasn't started speaking yet.
Well, first of all, I've said this to other parents. Especially if you're working and you're stressed, and which can create conflict with your child, if it's between a little more screen time and some serious parent-child conflict, go for the little more screen time. It may be necessary for the parent's mental health and indirectly for the child's mental health. So this is really I think this is definitely a time when we think about the good enough parent, and that sometimes we have to make some sacrifices in what we think is ideal to be able to get through the day without wringing each other's necks. So that's my first advice. There are some programs, I know this because of my now 2.5-year-old grandson. So it's the first time I actually did any kind of investigation. I shouldn't be advertising programs, but I know one that he loved at the age of 1, which is called Baby Bum. It's numbers, it's letters. It's not very much letters. It's mostly color. There is some counting in it. It's almost all singing, and so I think he learned his colors through that. And he probably actually learned some. He's pretty good at numbers, and I think he picked some of that up too. So it certainly isn't doing any harm, and probably was actually educational. So, but I too tried Sesame Street, and it was just too advanced for him. But Baby Mom, and my guess is if you ask other parents, you'll find that there are some out there that are both age appropriate and engaging and actually educational for kids.
And yeah, I just want to second what Deborah said about we all kind of need to give ourselves some breaks and engage in self-care. And I think in the long run, you're actually modeling taking care of yourself for your child, and that's important as well. We've got to, put on our own oxygen mask first. So keeping that in mind, it is important in your relationship with your child.
I got a question here from Bill. My 6-year-old boy detests getting a simple question wrong doing simple math. Is there a technique to help me get over his dislike of getting questions incorrect? I'm worried his need to be perfect will make his learning math more difficult in the future.
Well, first of all, he may be getting in school some emphasis on getting the right answer. That would not be the way we teach teachers to teach math at Stanford. The focus should be on understanding. And one of the things, there are a couple things you can do, is don't correct him. If he counts something or does it wrong, don't say, no, that wasn't right. Just take it. It's okay. He'll figure it out. It's more important that he's engaged in the activity than that he's getting the right answer. The other thing you can do is model getting things wrong. You know, when you count, in fact, one game that we play with kids sometimes is they don't want to count the objects we put in front of them. So we say, okay, I'm going to count them. And then we go 1, 2, 7, 9, 11. And, or 1, 2, we just miss a number. And the game is, did they notice when we missed a number? And then we go, oh, I can't believe I missed that. Well, I do them all the time. I mean, so, you know, make light of your own mistakes and don't correct him.
I think another thing that we sometimes teach our students to do is to ask children, rather than say, yes, you got it right, or no, that's not right, ask them what they think. Did they get it right? You know, were you right? Did you figure that out? And how do you know? I would maybe in this situation suggest starting with what Deborah said, model making the mistake first and get him a little more comfortable with that. And then start asking him, well, were you right? Because sometimes kids understand parts of a problem. They may not get the right final answer, but they understand parts of it. And so you're able to congratulate them for doing, you know, for figuring out a piece of it. And then that feels better than just feeling like I got the whole thing wrong. So being able to go to really understand what they're thinking about it can be useful for you as a parent as well.
But you may be,
yes,
you know, conflicting a little with your teacher. So at least you're at home, the child doesn't feel like he has to get the right answer. I just want to point out that there are a ton of recommendations for apps and programs that are coming up. So for the people who are interested, you've got the right group of people to give you some suggestions.
mm-hmm.
I just one caution though. You may find an app that you like and you think is good for your kid. Don't make them do it. If an app is good for your kid, especially a little kid, they're going to want to do it. So let them choose. And if they don't want to do the one that you think is just the right one for them, fine.
Yeah.
There's no better way to turn a child off to math or literacy or whatever it is you're hoping they'll learn than by forcing them to do things that they don't want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily, children tell us what's productive and effective for them just by their own attention and interest.
I've heard that there's an achievement gap that is being created that there is an achievement gap available for families with children in preschool. There are research and studies that might say that families that come from middle to that have middle or higher incomes have children that perform much better early on, and families that come from lower income households are poised to not perform as well. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on the effect of COVID-19 shedding more light on this gap, or maybe having a change or effect on how we look at this gap.
Yeah, one of the things, you know, most people call it an achievement gap. I think I like to think of it as an opportunity gap. It is true that children from more affluent or better educated families tend to have access and opportunities to develop skills on average more than children who are growing up in poverty. They're, you know, for all kinds of reasons. One is resources, but also time and stress on families and focus on other more major issues like food on the table and housing. I'm actually very worried about this particular situation because there's more home time, and for the kids who are in the more educated affluent families and or the families who are on this call right now who are deeply engaged and interested in providing educational opportunities for their children, they're going to get through this just fine. They may be pushing ahead at a faster rate than they would have in preschool or in childcare. But for children who are living in more stressed situations, they're going to fall farther behind. So I think as a society, we need to think not only how we as parents and grandparents can provide those opportunities for our children, but how can we make sure that all children have those opportunities, because the future of California's economy depends not just on our children, but all people's children. So I'm glad you asked the question, because I think it's something that all of us need to think about how we can contribute to that greater equity.